live. Oh, yep. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Kate, I'm from Protect Ningaloo, and today we are joined by marine researcher John Totterdell and conservation scientist Dr Bec Wellard. They're both here to talk to us all about killer whales today. Before we start, I'll just let everyone know that you can ask your questions in the comments, and then at the end, Bec and John will be able to answer your questions. But before we kick things off, I'll just hand over to Protect Ningaloo's director, Paul Gamblin.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining. This is the latest in our series from Protect Ningaloo on the wonders of Ningaloo and Exmouth Gulf. One of the key themes that's come through so strongly is that the more scientists look at this incredible region, the more they are unraveling some of the most incredible stories about nature in the world. So it just really reinforces the global significance of Ningaloo and Exmouth Gulf, and we are in for a real treat today. Thanks very much, John and Bec.
Thanks guys, thanks for the introduction. Hi everyone. Now I'll get the screen up so you guys can have a look at what we've been doing. How is that looking for everyone? Perfect. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to talk about killers of Ningaloo. I'm Bec Wellard, I'm from Project Orca and at Curtin University at the Centre for Marine Science and Technology. John?
Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation. I'm John Totterdell from Cetacean Research Centre based up at Ningaloo in Western Australia.
Beautiful. So a little bit about us. I'll just try to hide that one up there for us. So I've been studying marine mammals for the last 15 years. I've been lucky enough to do my PhD studying Australian and Antarctic killer whales. I've been working with John for many years now, so we've been lucky to work together in Western Australia on different killer whale populations and also Antarctica. John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I've been doing marine research in WA for, well, half my life. In the last 10 years, I've been focused with killer whales, two different populations of killer whales in Western Australia. And there's a small population of what we're calling tropical killer whales that frequent the waters off the Ningaloo coast and Exmouth Gulf. And what's really special about them is that most of the killer whales around the world are in the higher latitudes, in the cold water. They do go to the tropics, but there's nowhere else we know of where we can find and then study killer whales in a tropical location year in, year out. We've been doing that now for close to 10 years at Ningaloo, so that makes it unique and very special.
Brilliant. So enough about us. You came here to hear about the killer whales. So as John mentioned, killer whales, they're found in every ocean of the world. So after humans, they're actually the most widespread mammals. The name killer whale actually started from the term whale killer, which was termed from fishermen. And over the years, it's been flipped around to killer whale. Despite their name, killer whales are actually the largest dolphin in the dolphin family. So here's a really neat picture showing you how big in size they are in comparison to their dolphin cousins. So males can grow up to about 9 or 10 meters and females are a little bit smaller, up to about 7 to 8 meters. So despite our research, as John mentioned, probably being the last 10 years on killer whales here in Western Australia, Australia actually has a deep history with killer whales, which is really different to other parts of the world. And I'm going to tell you a little story about Old Tom and the killers of Eden. So it actually goes all the way back to 1840 when Australians used to whale, baleen whales. And off a little town in New South Wales, a pod of killer whales actually helped the whalers hunt them out of Twofold Bay in Eden, New South Wales. There's a little picture there from their skiffs, and old Tom was the big male that you can see in the big fin there. So one of the really cool ways that these killer whales helped these whalers hunt them was they would alert the whalers once they'd cahooned and pushed a baleen whale into Twofold Bay by breaching and tail slapping. And a lot of the time these whalers would be on high vantage points, so on hills, and they would see the killer whales come in and start breaching and tail slapping. So they would run down, get in their wooden skiffs, and then together with the killer whales, as you can see in the bottom picture there, they would work together to take down these large baleen whales. In return for their help, the whalers actually would follow the law of the tongue. So this is where they would leave a whale out for the killer whales. Usually overnight, they would tie some buoys or floats onto the fluke of the baleen whale and leave it in the bay. And overnight, the killer whales would feast on the jaw and the tongue of the baleen whales. This is the juiciest parts for them. So that's what they call the law of the tongue, a way that they thank the killer whales for helping them to take down these big animals. Old Tom died in September 1930, and his skeleton is still on display at Eden Killer Whale Museum, so South New South Wales. There's something really interesting in this picture here, if you can have a look. You see on one side of his mouth, there's really worn down teeth. That's actually because old Tom used to grab the rope that was between the harpooned whale and the whalers and hold on to it. And over time, he would do that quite frequently. It would wear down the teeth there. So that's how quite a unique little characteristic of old Tom there. So despite that, since from old Tom back in the days to today, there's still very little known about killer whales in Australia. We don't know their overall abundance. We don't know their overall population status, but they have been seen in all state and territory waters. We're pretty lucky here in WA, as John touched on. So there are three main aggregations, I guess you could call, known in Australian waters. So they're frequently sighted off East Tasmania, but they're also frequently sighted here in Western Australia, and they're two separate populations as well. So one in Bremer and one off the Ningaloo. And we haven't seen these animals go into each other's habitat. That's one of the most common questions I receive is, do we see the Ningaloo killers or the Bremer killers in each other's sites? We don't really see them across those ones. And their ecotype in Australia, it's currently undefined. So a lot of people also ask, what ecotype is this killer whale? So there's no defined ecotype of our Australian killer whales yet. Before we get into the Ningaloo killer whales, I think it's really important we touch on the environment and the interactions they have with other animals. And humpback whales and humpback whales in Exmouth Gulf are particularly important to killer whales. Did you guys know that Western Australia has the largest breeding population of humpback whales in the whole world? So this is called breeding stock D. It's one of the greatest conservation stories of our time. So when whaling ceased in 1963 here in Australia, the humpback whale population was brought down to be an estimated 568 individuals, which isn't really many from what it was. And since then, the humpback whale population has just grown exponentially. So it's estimated to be over 30,000, close to 40,000 here off Western Australia. And that brings us to the killer whales of the Ningaloo. So as we mentioned, there are killer whales seen off the Ningaloo in the austral winter. And these guys we observe during the winter are predating primarily on humpback calves. They have been recorded feeding on dolphins at other times, but the regular austral winter animals that we see, their main form of food source during this time is the humpback calves. So with the current humpback whale population that we gave you, this estimates to a possible 2,500 humpback calves per year. So that's food everywhere for these killer whales. So with an increase of prey, we hope that we continue to see an increase of predators. So between 2005 and now, off the Ningaloo Reef, a total of 146 killer whale sightings has been documented. Of these, 82 were attacks on humpback calves with 61 successful kills. So that's a lot of food that's around and available for these predators. As well as the humpback calves, we've also seen 2 successful attacks on spinner dolphins. And some of you, I think there might be some local Exmouthians watching, have seen the 2 tiger shark attacks and kills, which is pretty unique as well.
Bec, I'll just jump in for a sec.
Yeah, go.
That predation on the calves, just to make the point that with that huge increase in the humpback population, as you mentioned, the predation by the killer whales is very important to help keep that population from getting too large, stabilise the humpbacks to what will be a new what they call a carrying capacity of that population. So while it's can be thought of as quite gruesome, the predation by the killer whales are doing the population a great service. So that's the big picture of what's happening there.
Definitely, definitely. So step into a little bit on how me and John conduct our research. So there's lots of different methods. So one of the oldest ways to continue research on whale and dolphin populations is photo ID. There's lots of new technologies these days that we can also use. So drones is a new way to collect data. From this, you can look at behavioural data, body condition. We also use acoustics and underwater videography. So here I am deploying an underwater hydrophone, which is an underwater microphone. We also, this is me and Bob Pittman. A few of you have met off Exmouth, I'm sure. And when those humpback whales breach, they do leave a fair bit of juicy information in their skin when it comes off during those breaches. If anyone's been in the water after a humpback whale breach, you'll see there's lots of skin floating around. So that's just a really non-invasive way to get some data. We also collect information direct from the killer whales. So this picture here in your second from the left is John getting a genetic sample from the killer whales. So he uses a crossbow here, and you can just see the dart flying in towards the killer whale to the left there. And you just get a little pencil tip of information from that, but there is a lot of information that can come just from a little sample such as that, such as genetics, diet, stable isotopes, toxology, lots of information. We also do tagging. That's another question a lot of people ask. And this is a track of a killer whale tagged back in 2013. Who was this, John, out of the Ningaloo population? Was it Augie?
No, this was Abby, one of the matriarchs, the mother of 3 offspring that she's often seen with. She went down to the top of Shark Bay there, and you can see the red colour in the tag is fast speed travel, the green is slow. So you can see where they've pulled up, her and a group have pulled up to possibly feed, and then where they're travelling fast. So it's really important information about where they go and possibly what they're doing while they're travelling.
And that was just in 22 days. So that's quite a way to travel.
Yeah, the extension of that was the next week or so, they went about the same distance to the north and back. So Ningaloo seems to be the centre of movements for a lot of these groups.
So we touched on photo identification. This is one of the oldest ways for us to monitor dolphin populations around the world. Each individual killer whale is different, so it's unique as a thumbprint on a human. So for killer whales, we use 3 diagnostic features. We use their dorsal fin, which you can see here. They have lots of nicks and notches that are great for identification purposes. We also use their eye patch. Not all scientists around the world use their eye patch, but we do here in Australia. And we found the eye patches are unique to the animals all the way from birth, and they're unique on both sides as well. We also use the saddle patch on the killer whale. So this is the grey patch just behind the dorsal fin here. And if we've got killer whales that have really clean fins, the saddle patch is a really good way for us to help identify them. They've got lots of scratches and nicks and not on the saddle patch there. So we wanted to introduce you to a few of the Ningaloo killer whales. Some of you may have already met them. We've got Augie there on the right, one of the most flamboyant boys of the group. Currently in the winter months, we have identified 27 different killer whales. And as we mentioned, the winter animals tend to focus on the humpback whale calves. But more interestingly, there's also been killer whales seen in the summertime. So 14 animals have been identified off Exmouth and the Ningaloo in the summer, some in Exmouth Gulf as well. And 8 of these have been observed more than once. Their diet is still unknown. We still don't know a lot about the summer animals. So hopefully me and John will get up there during one of the hot Exmouth summers and start to learn a little bit more about these guys. We're not sure where they go. We're not sure where they come from. So yeah, there's still a lot to learn. One of the most interesting facts that everyone loves is being able to tell the difference between the boys and the girls. So when adult male killer whales are fully grown, they show sexual size dimorphism, which is a fancy scientific term telling us that there's different sizes between the sexes. So males will have a fully erect, very tall, up to 2 meters tall dorsal fin when they reach about 23 years of age. They start to sprout when they're about 13, 14, 15 years of age. And the term we use, sprouting, means that their falcate curved fin actually starts to grow taller and more straight over the years. One of the tricky ways to identify between a teenage boy and a teenage girl, it can be difficult because those males will still have falcate fins when they're teenage boys before they've started to sexually mature. And adult females keep that falcate fin as well, but you can see the size difference in them. So here's Augie on our left. A few of you well know Augie, and you can see him there with his big, beautiful, tall dorsal fin. He's still not a fully grown adult male yet, so he's still got a while to go, but he's turning out to be a nice, big, beefy boy. And here we've got Hook and Finn and Peck. And this was off 2016, I think. We had it off Coral Bay, is that right, John? Finn with Peck calf.
Yep.
So a little bit, we'll get to some cool little videos and sounds for you guys. One of the things I'm studying is how killer whales sound. So I thought you guys would want to hear how they sound. They're beautiful dialects. And these sounds are unique to populations and sometimes even unique to family groups. Here's some how the killer whales sound. So at the start of that, you could see the straight lines. That's actually echolocation. So they use that to navigate, to forage, to find food. And the other sounds that you heard that sounded like screeches is what they use to talk to each other. So that's their social sounds. Now we've got some very cool videos for you. I won't play that again for you. So how do they sound? Now, how do they behave? John's put together some beautiful videos that you might want to show us and talk to us about, John.
Yeah, here we've got a large group heading from the offshore waters. They do spend some time offshore at Ningaloo, but here you can see in the background there's the Cape Range Peninsula, and this group is heading in towards the reef. That particular day there was 3 feeding events happened just on sunset, just before dark. It's a group of 11 animals. You see 8 in this aerial image here. They split up into small groups of 3 or 4 and hunted some humpback calves, 3 humpback calves, which is the normal procedure where if there's a big group, they will split up for their hunting strategy. So it's just a beautiful Ningaloo water with some of the locals.
There's Augie with his big fin popping out.
Yeah.
We should note that although the males get all the attention, they're actually a matrilineal pod. So female rules the roost. Everyone listens to granny. So all males, although they're bigger and they tend to get more, I don't know, attention, I think we should need to pay more attention to the grannies. Here, John, and there's another video, and just a slight warning to what you're about to see is Mother Nature. John, you want to introduce it before I press play?
Yeah, this is just one predation that we captured down very close to the reef. You'll see Hook, the matriarch of this group, come through and take the calf. It's quite quick. The videos aren't playing on Zoom very well, but you get the idea from watching. So yeah, they're not playing that well, but you can certainly get an idea from a calm, tranquil ocean. It can when these animals decide to do some feeding. And as Bec said, it is largely the females who do the most of the attacks. When Augie was a bit younger, he was used as a decoy, like would swim across the bow, right across the nose of the humpback female adult, and hawk or another female would come in and actually make the kill. As Augie's getting older, he's becoming more part of the the attack itself, and the younger brother Spinner we've noticed is now doing the decoy role. So it's really clear that they've got a really well-defined strategy and cooperation for their foraging, which is really interesting.
And as John mentioned, they really do need to have that coordinated strategy as well. Hopefully you can see in the video, there's a huge pectoral fin of the humpback mother. And that's covered in tubercles and barnacles. And if she swipes you, she's got a lot of power in her fluke and in her pecs. So you need to make sure the killer whales are much smaller in comparison to the cow humpback. So by having that coordinated attack, as John's mentioning, and having everyone have their roles, they need to make sure that they steer clear of getting injured during these attacks as well. Is that video coming through very well, John?
It's jumping through, but I think everyone can get a really good idea about.
Sorry, guys, I had to play it
again. Just on how intense it can be.
Yeah.
But as we said, it can be quite disturbing and confronting for people to watch. But the big picture is that they're actually really doing this humpback population a great service, and the top-down predation pressure to help stabilise the population is extremely important.
And why don't we end on a happy note, hey, John? So they can go into their feeding mode, but they are dolphins and they can be super playful. And any local people off the Ningaloo Reef that have experienced one of our showstoppers, Augie, you'll see how friendly he can be towards the vessel here. You can see his big dorsal fin flopping out there. John, do you want to mention anything of this encounter?
Yeah, well, this was... this was out wide off the reef. Augie came and gave us a visit. We've got Nami Pasek and Sam Crispy, students, marine science students, who have come up and worked with us over the winter. He gave them a real treat this day.
Oh my God, he's like so... Oh my God, he's so weird!
He certainly dwarfs the small boat.
Yeah, he played around for about, well, it must be close to half an hour. He did 6, 7, 8 passes, and he ended up coming right up close and blew out a heap of spray and breath all over everyone. And that was his last, goodbye. He just soaked everyone in his spray. That was a memorable moment.
Oh, all right. Well, that's it from us, guys. And we probably went over time. Me and John could talk killer whales all day. But we're happy to answer questions now. If you want to, I'll stop sharing for you to take over, Kate.
Perfect. That was awesome. Thank you guys so much. We've got a few questions coming in already from people watching that. So I'll start off with one from June. June has asked, can you sample skin and blubber from killer whales in a similar way that you do with baleen whales, such as tissue sampling using unharmful darts?
John, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, we do sample baleen whales with a little dart. There's several ways of doing that. We can also do it with skin that just falls off when they breach, for instance. So, or some good data has now been collected by using drones where they can come down and capture a sample of the breath of the blow, which has moisture in it and a lot of information. So, yeah, it's all the same methods can be used for all the whales. It's a little trickier with killer whales. They're a big, highly mobile dolphin, so a little bit harder, but yeah, very, very similar methods, June.
I think on top of that as well, maybe she was questioning whether we can like scoop up the skin the way we do with the humpbacks when we breach. I think that might also be towards her question. And with the humpbacks, they're migrating from colder waters. So when they're coming up from Antarctica up to warmer waters, they shed their skin as they start to get into warmer waters, which is another reason why when they breach, we're getting so many skin samples from the water that we can just scoop up and they're everywhere. The killer whales up there aren't really migrating to shed their skin, so they're not shedding their skin as much as we would see with the humpbacks. So yeah, one of the ways we do it is through darts. It's a very effective way for us to collect the data. The animals barely feel it or barely react it. It's been used for decades now in cetacean research. Sometimes we've even got a sample and the killer whales turned around and started nuzzling the darts. So it certainly doesn't affect them too much. It would be nice if they breached all the time and we could get some skin sample. It would make mine and John's life a little bit easier. But no, we don't get as much skin samples from when they breach like humpbacks.
Well, also, Bec, just to finish up on that, interesting, like I suppose the observation we've made, we record the response to animals, whether with all the work that we do. And with the biopsy sampling on humpbacks, we've noticed that the males almost invariably have a higher reaction than the females. Now we're looking at that. We've got a lot of data on that, and we'll do some more work on that. But I'll just leave that out there as to people can make their own mind up as to what's going on there. But the males seem to be very sensitive to a little pinprick, and the females, we often get no reaction at all. So that's interesting.
Not unlike human males with the man colds.
Yeah, let's not go there. All right?
Monique has asked, are the orcas spotted at the Gulf and Bremer the same or distinct population groups?
No, so we touched on that. Sorry, you go, John.
They are distinct. We've done some genetic work and they've actually shown to be quite removed. They're not, well, at some stage they've got a common ancestor, of course, but they are quite removed. The Bremer animals are linking closer with other Southern Hemisphere populations, like temperate populations. The Ningaloo population animals up there are linking more with other tropical ones, which makes sense. So that even though they're in WA, they're both readily accessible, they're kind of close geographically, they are genetically quite distinct as well. So we're not seeing any crossover.
In a pod of orcas, sorry, this one's from Kimberly. In a pod of orcas, are they all from one family? And if they are, do all the males breed, or is there a main breeding pair?
You go, Bec.
Hi, Kimberly. Good question. So they do live in a matrilineal pod. So generally they will stay with their mother for the whole of their lives. Their males do tend to stay with their mum, and they will go off to other family groups and mate and then come back. There are instances where the daughters will actually leave their maternal pod and start their own pod. So that's how new pods start. I hope that answered your question, Kimberly. I'm trying to make it short because we've got a lot of questions coming in.
Here's an interesting one for you. It's from Kim. She has asked, if you jumped in with a killer whale, would he play or eat you?
I think sometimes they just ignore. So a few of the people off Exmouth have been in the water during their whale shark tours, and the killer whales have just swum underneath them and kept going. There's been no records of killer whales eating a human in the wild. I would have no fear swimming with them. It'd be nice if they played, but they can be rough players. So I don't know if I'd want them to play with me so directly.
Kelly has asked, will climate change impact, or has it already impacted killer whale migrations and movements? Do they need certain water temperatures?
Not so much the migration. So killer whales aren't like baleen whales. They don't migrate like mysticetes, so humpbacks and blues that, you know, go up from Antarctica up north. Killer whales do small migrations for some skin shedding, so a bit of a day spa, but other than that, killer whales don't really migrate in the term that baleen whales do. Everything is affected by climate change, so climate change will be affecting the smaller things in the trophic system, and it all is interconnected as it moves up and down that system. But in short answer to your migration, no.
Rudy has asked, I'm assuming they're talking about the killer whales that are in the Ningaloo Exmouth area. Where do they go when humpbacks are not around?
You take this one, John. I've been answering them all.
Well, we've got a little bit of information on that. For a long time, we didn't really know. We knew that they didn't go south. We weren't seeing reports off the mid coast or off the Rottnest coast, or certainly not off the south coast in the Bremer region. So we've known for a while that they didn't go south. And just recently, we did get some information that the main group, we see that's Hook's group, Hook and Augie, was at the Rolly Shoals in February and March, which was the first evidence that we had of when they weren't at Ningaloo, they were further north, which confirmed our feeling that these are a tropical population up there. And then when the genetics came in that matched them with other tropical regions, that's kind of confirmed that the Ningaloo could well be the southern area for this population that we find that frequent there through winter. And so that's really interesting.
I'm just going to ask a couple more questions because we've gone over time. So second last question is, what are the threats to orca populations? Are there any threats? That one's from Steph, by the way.
John, do you want to take that?
Well, there are some populations that are that we find, and other colleagues are finding, that are really high in pollutants. They're at the top of the food chain, so they're vulnerable to have an accumulation of marine pollutants that builds up in the food chain, in the prey, and then it accumulates in them. So luckily, the parts of the world and certain countries have stopped capturing them for putting them in sea worlds and the stuff, which was a big threat. So I think marine pollutants through their diet is probably the biggest threat to them. Anything to add on that, Bec?
There's numerous threats, and I could talk about this for another 10 minutes, but I won't hold you guys up. But please ask us more questions after this online, and I'll happily discuss it.
Yeah, there's plenty of questions in the comments. So if anyone doesn't have their question read out, Bec and John can reply on Facebook. This question is for you, Bec. It's from Kim. He has asked, can you confirm that killer whales have had audiograms conducted at SeaWorld and that they can hear frequencies over long distances away?
So they have done audiograms. Actually, my colleague Klaus did an audiogram on a killer whale in the Netherlands. We have looked at their frequency, range of hearing, and by looking at the directional length of hearing, so you need to look at what type of calls they're doing. If it's a low frequency call, that's going to travel longer and further in the water column. A high frequency call will attenuate as it goes down. So I'm not sure how specific you want me to get there for you guys. I'm happy to talk more about audiograms. I can send you the scientific peer-reviewed paper as well, showing you the results of this. They have 3 types of vocalizations, and their frequency does range throughout that as well. But I'm happy to send you the paper so I don't go over time and talk about this.
Well, I'm going to make us go over time. I just have one more question that's really interesting, and I want to know the answer to that. Someone has asked. They said, how frequently do you see orcas and great whites cross paths, and which is truly the apex predator of the ocean?
Hands down, killer whale. It's not even a question.
Yeah, the second part is easy to answer. Yeah, we don't see them cross over very much at all, but it does happen.
It's happened twice off South Australia. There's been 2 documented accounts of killer whales actually killing great white sharks. And it's also happened a little bit more frequently off the South African coast. Some great whites have washed up. I'm sure you've seen it hit the news lines, where the killer whales have sliced through just underneath the pectoral fin of the great whites and pushed out the liver, which is full of some juicy nutrients for them, and decided just to eat that. And then the great whites will wash up. It's also been documented off California in the islands up there as well. So it's not very frequent, but if you were in a competition between a killer whale versus great white, the killer whale's going to win. Not even a question. We're team killer whale, can you tell?
That was awesome. Thank you guys so much. We do have quite a few more questions, but we have already gone over time a little bit. So wrap it up there. We could talk forever. This is so interesting. But as I mentioned before, there's plenty of questions still happening in the comment section of our video on Facebook, so you can ask away. And when Bec and John have time, they can jump in and answer the questions for you. But thank you, of course, to Bec and John for your time and for that presentation. We really appreciate it. It was awesome.
No worries.
Thanks,
Thanks for
guys.
having us.
Thanks for me. I just wanted to say, I mean, the nature and the species around Ningaloo are amazing, but actually it's the people as well. And people like Bec and John, you've dedicated your lives, are dedicating your lives to understand this and going to huge efforts and also to communicate what you're finding. So thanks to you and good luck with your future research. We're so looking forward to hearing more about it down the track.
Thanks for the opportunity, Paul and Kate. Cheers.
Likewise. Thank you,
Thanks, guys.